Well, rising prices for ivory have fueled a skyrocketing level of elephant poaching, and there is evidence that the money is being used to fund terrorist organizations. As VOA's Carolyn reports, 6 tons of ivory was crushed last week by the U.S. government to send a strong message to poachers.
The U.S. government spent the past 25 years amassing seized illegal ivory contraband in a Colorado warehouse. Ultimately, the government's stash grew to 6 tons, equivalent to ivory from 2,000 elephants. A kilo of raw ivory, also known as white gold, can sell for up to $3,000 on the black market. But elephant conservationists say there are not enough elephants to supply the insatiable demand for ivory in the Asian market.
And in fact, the money involved now is the reason this is being driven to such a critical and crisis point for elephants. The price and profitability involved is enormous, and that we have seen a major escalation in the value of elephant ivory in the markets in China, which has caused this unfortunate incentive for criminal networks and terror groups to get involved in the poaching and trafficking.
U.S. President Barack Obama signed an executive order last year establishing a task force to combat wildlife trafficking. Last week, U.S. officials destroyed the 6 tons of seized ivory in an operation that conservationists hope will send a message to elephant poachers and wildlife traffickers. The move is part of a global effort to combat elephant poaching that is being fueled by the demand for ivory trinkets in Asia. The ivory was fed into a massive rock crusher that pulverized it into white dust.
Symbolic because it sends the message to poachers, traffickers, and consumers all over the world that trading and consumption of ivory is immoral. It costs the lives of hundreds and thousands of elephants.
Over 10 years, the forest elephant population in Central Africa plummeted more than 60% to about 100,000 elephants in 2011, from about 300,000 in 2002, according to estimates published this year in the PLOS One scientific journal. Besides the threat of extinction, evidence is mounting that illegal ivory sales are funding terrorist organizations. An international call to action began last year by then U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, according to Crawford Allen of the World Wildlife Fund.
She said very clearly to myself and a group of other organizations involved with wildlife conservation that the Janjaweed militias are definitely involved in the poaching of elephants in some countries in Africa and trafficking in that elephant ivory. And she actually in November of last year brought about an international call to action, which the State Department is leading in the US, to try and combat this. And she made it very clear at that time that the link for the financial flows to terrorism is clear in several cases, in several countries, and for several terror groups. And therefore this has become a high-level issue for them because it has this important link to security agenda. She has mentioned, obviously, the countries involved being in the Horn of Africa area and Sudan and Somalia, of course, and the poaching that's taking place is happening in countries like the Central African Republic, in Chad, in Cameroon, where in fact large groups of militias will travel across country on horseback quite often, heavily armed, will pay no heed to international boundaries and borders, and they will actually go in and wipe out hundreds of elephants at a time and carry that ivory back on the backs of camels and horses back across Africa to where they will meet with the middlemen traders to make a very large profit.
Since 1990, more than 170 countries have prohibited the international trade of African elephant ivory.
It's a sad state of affairs, but we've got a lot of hope now. I mean, thanks to the efforts of the United States, which have been leading the pushback and leading new initiatives to try and tackle it, we've got a lot of hope that things are really going to turn around and change quickly.
African elephants are now listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54. Please join the conversation on Facebook and check out our top headlines 24/7 on Africa.com.